I know everyone's making a tip calculator as a tutorial, but how well is that done? And how can we make it easy for the user to use? This video is going to help you find out. So the idea here is we're creating a simple tip calculator. Enter the amount of guests and enter the amount of a meal, and it comes up tip to pay, tip per guest, etc. And you can change the tip percentage. Hopefully nothing too exciting there, but if I use the software keyboard, it doesn't allow any of the other characters, and hopefully we can use a decimal point, and we can't have more than one decimal, so that's quite useful. So let's see how we might implement this. So I want to go through the setup of this tips app. It might not be the usual way I'd structure creating the app, but I think this is useful because I can explain to you bit by bit what I'm doing. So I'm going to create a new iOS project, of course. This is going to be SwiftUI, and so the life cycle SwiftUI, that looks fine to me. Call it tips, and we'll put it there. So I'm going to use MVVM and split out the view model from the view controller. So I'm going to need my content view, and I'm going to need a view model. I think I'll leave this called content view at least for now. And I'm going to have a view model. For ease, I might call it content view model. So these are not names that usually you'd call them because it's context specific stuff, but I'm calling it content just to make it a little bit easier for me. So a view model will be a class, and I'll call it content view model with an initializer, and our content view is going to require an initializer which will be provided with our view model, which is a content view model tab tab tab, and I'm going to create a variable, and I'm just going to check on my completed version. I don't want people to think I'm doing all this from memory because it's just not true. So this is an observed object, so we'll be able to see when there are changes made, and it's going to be our view model, which is of type content view model. So we can set that view model to be the one that's passed through the initializer, which is view model. So I don't much care about this preview. Get our content view model, and currently our view model is an observed object, can't be observed, sorry, observable, and I guess we won't be able to set this up because our content view doesn't have a view model. And of course that's a type, not an instance, fine. Okay, that builds, so I'm expecting it, and I'm not going to use previews. I just want to see it working in the simulator. And I'm just expecting it to say, hello world, nothing special here, I'm just setting up my view and the view model. Not passed any data, nothing to check. Good, that's the basic setup. So here I'm going to go through the view model step by step so I can explain what's going on. So I'm going to have several parts of the view model that I'm going to call output. So it would be a good idea here to import combine. Okay, so we're going to have a tip, which is a NS decimal number, which will be displayed over in the view. The guest tip, so that's the tip per guests, and the amount to pay overall. And we're going to have to bind to some variables, which are also published. So the amount is the amount of the meal in this case, the amount of guests we would have, and the selected tip. Now this is an index because it will come over from a segmented control. So usually you do these step by step. I'm doing them all together, but you'll see how it works towards the end of the video. I might suggest that you download the code to be able to easily follow along with this. So tip percentages, these are the tip percentages that will be used in a segmented control over on the view. And because I'm using combine, I'm going to have a set of all the cancellables. Now what's going to happen is when the view is initialized, it will initialize this view model. So within this initializer, I'm going to set up a series of sinks. So when the amount is changed, we're going to calculate the tip, which seems sensible, and it's stored in the cancellables to conform to combine's memory rules. Guests, when the guests are changed, it calculates the tip, and when the tip index is changed, we calculate the tip. So when any of the kind of variables, the input variables are changed, we calculate the tip. It's always on the main queue, which means that we can do UI work. Now internally for this, we're going to need a tip percentage and tip choices. So these will be calculated while calculating the tip, which is just this maths here, and we can read through it, but you can't calculate a tip without an amount, so I've put a guard statement in here. And this gives me my basic view model, which then I'm going to display on the content view. So before I talk about the view, I'm going to need to use a currency field. Now often people are wrapping UI text fields and UI text views to do this type of thing in SwiftUI, but there's no real need. Now it's a little bit involved. We've got number formatters here, we've got a state, so SwiftUI is managing this as a source of truth for the value while editing, and a boolean whether it's editing or not, but then it will know when to update, and we have a title and a value which are pulled in from the initializer. Now I'm going to go through this in detail in a separate video, but the code is here, and this is kind of an external component that I'm going to use within my view. So it makes a lot of sense that we're moving the code here to a separate file, and then we'll reference that. So here I'm going to display the content suggested by the view model in the view. And I know some of that content is going to be currency, so I'm going to use the currency formatter so it's appropriate for the user's setting on their phone. I could have put this in the extension for number formatter. I've decided not to and made a private var here. We're going to put all this data into a form so it's nicely formatted for the user, and it's going to have the tip calculator at the top as a title. The section header is going to be enter your meal information here, so it's nice and easy for the user to see which section they're in. And I'm going to use a stepper so the user can select how many guests using plus or minus. This is connected to the observed value in the view model. And I'm using that currency field to have more control over what the user can enter and display the output nicely. I've got another section, and this has a picker, so then the user can select which tip, and this is kind of sent back to the view model with this selected tip index. And whenever it's got the dollar, the view model will be notified of a change and it will recalculate the tip. And in this case, it's also getting the chosen tips from the view model. And here, this is the section where we're going to display the results. And we're using that currency formatter to display them so it makes sense to the user. And if we run, then we've got a reasonably working app. It comes up with the details, and I can't type in any other numbers into here. So that's pretty useful, and I think an interesting app to make to get a little bit more used to SwiftUI.